My name is Brittany Mccusker. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Adult Programming and Special Events Director at Kent Memorial Library. And I'm very, very, very excited about our presentation tonight with Rocksteady Farm and Flowers. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, so I hope that you enjoy it. But first, I just want to say thanks to Rocksteady, of course, for being here, but also I want to shout out to Northeast Millerton Library and Amenia Free Library, who have some patrons with us tonight. So thank you for joining us. And also because it's spring and we're speaking with farmers tonight, I just wanted to mention that Kent is nearing the end of our Daffodil Days celebration in the town of Kent. This is a 2-week event that ends this Friday. So featured shops in town are offering daffodil or yellow themed promotions. And also what's really exciting is that you can enjoy a town-wide QR code scavenger hunt. So you just take your mobile device around town and you'll see in different businesses and organizations QR codes, and each QR code will give you a clue to the next QR code. And every time you find one, you're registering yourself to win a giant basket full of gifts valued over $200 from local businesses. And the library is actually a really great starting point. So head to the library and you'll see the little clue for your QR code. And also, just before we get started, I'll have the farmers introduce themselves, but I wanted to mention, just keep your microphones muted tonight. We really want all of you to participate, ask questions, get involved, but do so using the chat feature. So just type in your questions. I'm going to read them out loud, and that way we can be respectful of everyone's time and sound. So I will hand it over to Rocksteady. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Amara Uyauri. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a vegetable farmer at Rocksteady Farm and also the education coordinator. Started there last June. So I am new to this area and learning about the springtime here, and really excited to share this evening with you all as someone who's also building community in these new lands. So thank you for being here. And I'm right next to my coworker, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Mccusker. I use they, them pronouns. Also a farmer at Rocksteady. I joined last year. This year, I'll be coming in working more in the wash pack. And I'm from the South, and I have been farming on and off for about 10 years. So I love farming and community and all the ways that we can share that labor and joy with each other. So I'm really so happy for all of you to be interested. And thanks for joining us tonight. I'll pass it to Maggie.
Cool. Well, my name is Maggie. I'm one of the co-founders and co-owners of Rocksteady Farm. And I'll be giving you like a rundown of our farm, kind of a short presentation, and then we'll have questions at the end. But I will go ahead and start. So I'll share my screen. Great. All right, so we've got 3 of us here today, but we are just 3 of 10 farmers. And you can see their lovely faces here today. Some of them may join later. But one of our favorite parts about Rocksteady is that we have an amazing team. So we're really, really excited to be going into the season with all returning members, and I'm completely obsessed with them. So I'm glad that there's more people other than me on this call today. So Rocksteady is an LGBT owned and operated cooperative farm. We're rooted in social justice, growing sustainable vegetables in Millerton, New York. We believe that all people have the right to healthy and nutritious food. So we have a number of focus areas. We've got our focus area around food access, sustainable agriculture, so we grow organically, but we're not certified, farmer advocacy and training, community engagement. And it's a lot to tackle these kind of more mission and nonprofit oriented areas. And how we do that is we're a for-profit cooperative, but we have a fiscal sponsorship, which enables us to apply for grants and take donations. So that is like a hybrid model that's a little unique to this area and to many farms in the US. So yeah, quite close by Millerton to Kent. And we are on Schaghticoke First Nations land, which is an important connection for us, not just knowing, who stewarded this land for hundreds of years that we were on, but also just have a personal connection to some of those leaders in our area, and celebrate what they're doing, to this day on other land that's actually based in Copiague. And this is our 6th season. We're on 8 acres of leased land. This year we have a 500-person CSA, and that's both upstate in the Millerton area on our farm, as well as in New York City. We have 7 drop-off locations, and we go down to the city 2 times a week. More than 57% of our CSA is low income, and that's something that I'll talk a little bit more about in our presentation. We also have wholesale, so 50,000-ish in wholesale. We love growing tomatoes, so that's a big one, kale. So we have select vegetables that we grow in larger amounts. So you might see our stuff in local grocery stores, Le Bon's, at restaurants in Millerton, as well as some large chains in New York City. And this year is our first year of increased public programming, which Amada will talk a little bit more about. So here's some more pictures of our farm. So 2020, we had a team of 9, we have a team of 10 this year. Some folks are part-time because we're doing expansion of programming and education. We have a little bit of kind of like office work and educational work that we're doing too. And we're an all LGBTQ run farm, which is important to us. We are very out with our identity, and we're grounded in that at the farm too, and trying to create a space that feels really welcoming and safe for the queer community, as well as for like mixed race and BIPOC community as well. Here's some of our summer squash. There's Kyle, who might join us. Dee is one of the other co-founders. That's an example of our CSA pickup, which some of you, I think, belong to. So social justice mission is really important to us, and that's also the topic of today's Zoom. So just wanted to give that a bit of a highlight. For us, although a lot of people know about our food access work, it's really important that we also talk about our co-op model, which is really, really important to our mission as well, providing leadership opportunities and decision-making, more horizontal workspace, opportunities for equity for farmers who may not have that opportunity elsewhere. So that's really important to us, as well as what I talked about. We're also leaning more into storytelling and trying to get the voice of more like marginalized farmers out there in the world. I feel like farming is something that is so often not understood, as more and more people have kind of moved away from the land, and the farming world has become so much more industrialized that we've become like very, very distanced from the actual reality of what farming is. So part of our work is to lean into that storytelling. And as I mentioned, we're doing more public programming, which includes workshops for LGBTQ farmers, tours for partner organizations, our community work days, online workshops like this, and some other ones we're doing. And we're launching a paid apprenticeship program for LGBTQ farmers in 2022, although we're doing the pilot this year, which is super exciting. Oops. There we go. A lot of people ask us why we're an out farm, because not a lot of people, I don't know, think about identity and farming all the time. For us, there are a lot of reasons. I'll just highlight briefly. Generally, representation matters, especially in rural spaces where there's not a lot of LGBTQ representation, not just in the farming world, but just in all sectors. So if we feel like we're in a place that we can be out safely, and we do feel that way, luckily we have an incredibly supportive community, we think it's really important that we are. And that not only provides examples for other queer youth and queer people in the rural community, but also for queer people in the city who feel really estranged from rural communities and nature. And if they can see that it's actually a place that is welcoming to them and that this is a life that they could lead, that's really important to us to make those connections. We also love hosting, queer families. A lot of our CSA members might be able to less comfortable bringing their family to our farm. So we providing a safe place for not only our farmers, but our community and our CSA members feels important to us. And also being able to train and communicate with a lot of other LGBTQ farmers all over the country and the world, which has been something that has been very eye-opening for Rocksteady, to see how much kind of like meaning people find in our work that we're doing. But also the health of our community matters. LGBTQ people a huge amount of food access insecurity and also health-related illnesses. And it's important that we're really feeding our community and making sure that we're connecting to them as much as possible. Here's some pictures from Milo, Camille, sense of our crops. Some stats around health disparities for LGBTQ. Yeah, these are just some past farmers. There's those two are on the call with us. So our food access model, I'll go into just in kind of broad strokes. A lot of people ask us questions about like how we're able to provide so much food to lower income people while still being a for-profit. So the way we do that is through a sliding scale, which many people are used to sliding scales in all different sectors, but we're trying to bring it into the same model, which is a little bit less common. And a lot of people find the CSA model prohibitive because of the upfront cost. So our sliding scale not only provides, affordable shares for some people, but also we're really flexible on how people want to pay. And if they want to do SNAP, they can also do that. We also offer solidarity shares, which are fully funded by our own fundraising and by grants specifically. So we have donors and grants that allow us to raise funds for the solidarity shares. This year we have 145 solidarity shares, which are fully funded. And then we also do direct sales to community partner organizations. So those are food pantries. We've also been partnering with some community organizations where we provide more like a wholesale model where they choose from our list that goes out each week for community meals. So a lot of different ways that we're accessing communities that are not always in the local food movement and kind of accessible to this type of food locally. Some tasty lettuces, which we'll have soon. Right now, we don't have much food on the farm. Very seasonal. We don't have a lot of greenhouses yet. We have offer bread. So yeah, we have a big reach. There's some stats. 100,000 meals. Can't say that's not nothing. Some pics. Here's one of our partners in the city. I always talk about our financing. I know we don't have too much time, but yeah, we're just real transparent about what it takes to run a farm. You know, I had in there our wages. We make usually between $15 and $17 an hour. That's on a little bit on the upper end of this area for but we also, you know, we lease our land. The three co-founders, Dee, Angela, and myself, we all put $500 into our business to start it up. But we applied for a large loan from the working world, now called Seed Commons, who fund specifically BIPOC and LGBTQ run cooperatives. And they gave us our startup loan, which was $120,000. That really allowed us to start farming 6 years ago with a lot of equipment and kind of hit the ground running. But also we had a lot of experience going into it. So, you know, it wasn't that we had it dialed those first couple of years. We didn't. We definitely were learning. But it did, you know, we did have about 30 years of larger scale farming experience before we started the business. So these are, and to date, we have an incredibly skilled team. And I just want to highlight that. So even though our wages are low, we, as are very many farmers out there, incredibly intelligent, incredibly skilled, have many, many years of doing this work under them. So just want to highlight just like how much I value that work in general. But you know, it's been a rough couple of years. We definitely had a lot of hurdles, and we've needed to lean on our community. So we have done large fundraisers to really support us in those leaner years while we were navigating some natural disasters and of the like, as farmers do. And I think is very pertains to this conversation around climate change. Because as you can see, you know, the climate is affecting poorer countries more often, and agricultural areas, when they're hard hit, it's hugely impactful to not only those farmers' lives, but the economy around them. And you know, we're so lucky that in our area we actually have had not that bad weather compared to a lot of other places in the world. So just definitely resonate with the impact that climate change has on farmers' lives. Yeah, so this is the end of my talking and my slides, but I think Amada will speak a little bit more. I don't know if they can jump on here, but maybe I'll read this. Oh, great, you're here too. Awesome. So thank you all. Happy to take questions and excited for this conversation. Really appreciate y'all. Go for it, Amada.
Yeah, so part of the work that we do, you know, being on the field, transplanting, sowing a lot of seeds, we want to share that with you all. So this year we are going to have 3 community work days for the season. We have one coming up May 15th. Hopefully the weather is nice. Otherwise, our rain date would be that Sunday on the 16th. And really, it's an opportunity for us to meet folks in the community, for the community to meet us, and support us by getting some big group work done. So because of COVID and because we want to be intentional with the time we're spending together and being able to instruct folks to stay safe, and have fun while we're doing this work. We are asking folks to register. Even if you're coming with like your family, your friends, we're just asking folks to register. That also gives us an idea of how many people are going to show up and allows us to better plan staffing and also projects for the day. So I really encourage you all to sign up for any of these dates. I'm going to pop the registration link into our chat in just a second. And we will be sending out confirmations and a few notes on like what to expect in terms of tasks that we'll be working on, because we can get into this in just a little bit, but like every day is a little different and we are always staying very flexible and adaptive. And I know that having a big group of people on the farm is just going to be like great energizing work for us all, and also just like help move the season along a lot more smoothly. So I'm gonna pop the registration into the chat, and I hope that you all register and that we get to meet each other in person.
Thanks, Mata. Great.
Great, thank you. So
I'll stop my sharing so we
perfect.
can all show our faces, all right?
Thank you. I see some questions have already started popping in the chat, but I'm going to start because I'm the host and the host makes the choices, the decisions. But so I have a few things that I just wanted to ask you. One might be the most obvious question: how has the pandemic affected your work, changed your goals, long term and short term? Can you give us some insight on that?
Sure. I was pinned to answer this question, so I will. Yeah, the pandemic is very, very challenging. I think a year ago, things felt very different than they do today. I think we've come a long way in a year in terms of just vaccinations rolling out in the way that they are. And so I think the main thing as an owner and manager of our farm is our staff's health and well-being, and also our CSA members. So for the most part, we did a lot of like health and sanitation work on the farm in terms of making sure that people were washing their hands. We had a lot of kind of like group decision making around what felt comfortable for people in terms of like their own safety. And then we decided to shift all of our CSAs to pre-boxed and pre-lined. So that's a big task when you're going from kind of like farmer's market, grocery style, where you have big bins, to all pre-boxed. And so that took more labor and more expenses in terms of supplies. So we did end up hiring mid-season for a little bit more support for both driving and boxing, and just the increased labor that COVID was causing us. We also decided to focus fully on vegetable production and not flowers. We were at that direction anyways, but this was a real push to like to really lean into that quicker than later, because the flower industry was going under at the time, no events, anything. So we had to like scramble with what flowers we did have in the field at the time. But we ended up really just like being so grateful that our focus went to food specifically, because the need was so high in our community and in New York City. So it felt really grounding to be doing that work and to be able to feed people at a time that was so uncertain, and so many people had so much loss going on, and to be able to do something that felt really positive, and important, was very meaningful to all of us, I think, and grounded us at Rocksteady. So we ended up increasing our CSA last year, about 100 members from the previous year. And we also had to shift a lot of wholesale towards CSA. You know, a lot of restaurants went down or closed. And so it was a big scramble to kind of shift away from restaurants into CSA. And then we also ended up doing increased fundraising so that we could reach more people who didn't have access to food. So we were able to do that fundraising mid-season and meet more people who were reaching out to us, because we had a lot of people reaching out to us to join our farm. We had a 200-person waiting list. So it was, and that's of all income levels. But I mean, it would be more, I think, given our community partners that we work with, we were just feeding like a very small portion of their communities they work with. Yeah, our partners in New York City, like are the Community Health Center, Cal and Lord, they were doing amazing work last year to be able to house and feed specifically homeless LGBTQ people who were suffering from COVID. And, you know, and just knowing that the people we were partnered with were doing such amazing work was also like very inspiring to us to try to like, you know, meet that and like do what we could. So yeah, that's a little bit of what went on besides all the stress.
Exactly. Well, you handled it so well. So kind of going off what you were just saying about how, and you showed in your slides some statistics. I don't know if we want to go back to that, but I saw this quote the other day that Nigerian author Ijima Oluo reposted from Earth Justice, and they said, "What is climate justice? It's racial justice, it's social justice, it's economic justice, justice for all." And I immediately thought of Rocksteady. And I was hoping, this is a question for all of you, I hope you all want to chime in. Can you elaborate on that? And can you give us a better understanding of how all of these issues are intersectional and kind of enlighten us?
I'll leave it up to the other two farmers, see if you all want to chime in.
Go ahead, Amada.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I think, a really concise way of putting the fact that we are working against big oppressive systems and doing what we can from where we're at, right? And with the understanding that, one, the history of food and agriculture in this country, right, is tied to a history of genocide, of displacement and enslavement, right, of Indigenous peoples, Black peoples. And so that type of violence, that legacy of violence continues today. And we see that in our continuing the agricultural system and the educational system and the healthcare system and the justice system, right? And it's important to yeah, just like recognize the root of a lot of the struggles that people of color, marginalized people, low-income people, LGBTQ communities, Indigenous peoples, Black peoples in this land are up against systems that are rooted in colonization and enslavement. And because of that, right, our food system, I often hear like our food system is broken or our justice system is broken, and it's not. It's all working exactly as it's meant to work, right? To create profit, to consolidate power in the hands of few, and to demoralize and to extract resources and power and energy from the masses, right? So in our work as farmers, we're not just talking about directly like feeding folks who are tied to our identities in our communities. But we're also talking about and doing the work of addressing climate justice, environmental justice, because they're all tied together in terms of the ways that we approach other human beings, is also the ways that we approach like our relationship to the earth, and these very like extractive, very one directional type of relationships. And I think that if we're going to be talking about sustainability and like moving beyond these oppressive systems, then we have to build reciprocity, right, with one another, which I think is like the powerful thing working in a out queer farm, where our relationships, it's not just like queerness as in like our sexuality, right, but it's also like queerness in our relationships and our care for each other, and therefore the care that we have for the earth, right? And although we have some goals, like in terms of like regenerative or like sustainable agriculture, whatever you want to call it, right, that aligns us to be in better relationship with the earth, although we might not be able to achieve all those goals right now because of capitalism, right, and like those types of pressures, there's something still important there to like recognize that we want to be in better relationship with each other, and therefore that man also translates to like being better relationship with the land that we occupy, and feel a sense of commitment to the seeds that we steward, the plant stories, and yeah, so for me, everything is connected, and we're always out in the field, just like having really beautiful and powerful conversations, to also remind us that we are connected to a global food system. We are connected to community beyond the farm, right? So yeah, Melissa, want to say anything else?
No, that was great. I don't have anything else to add to that. Sorry.
Well, I'm going to open up to Q&A from the chat, but I just wanted to ask if you could dive in a little bit into the practices that you do have now versus to be sustainable and give back to the earth, and what can you achieve now, and what are your goals for later?
Yeah, like Amada said, there's always this balancing act, right? Where it's like doing as much as you can in the moment while also holding the pressure of capitalism and the finances. And yeah, so I think it's an ongoing path, like it's a journey to align with what the soil needs and what the earth needs. And right now we do, we're very tractor based, we're at a scale, just so people have an idea. You saw the tractors in there, but so we are a tractor based farm, but we try to really take care and use our tractors in a responsible way, and trying to minimize tillage and not be in the soil when it's too wet or too dry, and kind of implements we're using. So there's like work in that realm around soil health, and also that allows us to not spray, right? So like if you're really intentional about the tractor work that you're doing, which includes weeding implements that you drag behind the tractor, or you sit on a tractor that's all it's doing is weeding. If you spend those like human hours doing that work, you don't have to spray on the fields herbicides, and we're able to kind of like do a lot of human powered work on the farm, versus these sprays that larger industrial like agriculture is more used to doing. So we might be hand hoeing also more than herbicides, and we cover a lot of our crops with a blanket that's called like Remay or Agribond, that really protects our crops from pests and disease, mostly pests, and the cold. And we are able to like remove that Remay to weed it, put the Remay back on. And that whole process is very labor intensive and also very expensive. You know, it's thousands of dollars that we're spending on these covers. But that means we don't have to spray as much. We do spray sometimes with organic pesticides. We spray a couple times a year for very certain pests. And we also add a lot of organic matter to the soil with compost. We have like a local supplier, which is great. Like, so we can get both our like propagation soil and our compost. They're all local, which is important to us. And we add that to the fields today. Amada and Lisa were actually like shoveling it into the field because our compost spreader broke midday. So there's a fun exercise in muscle building. And so we do that. And sometimes that's, you know, one year we spent $10,000 on organic compost. You know, it's like, it's large amounts, dump trucks of compost that we're adding. And that's building the soil's resilience to climate change. You know, it's all about building your soil health so that if there are floods, if there's drought, if there's high winds, the soil can hold itself together better and have really strong root systems when you grow crops. You know, like the healthier your soil is, the more resilient you are to climate change. So that's like the heart of a lot of what we do. That's why I started with talking about soil, because it's all about that. And then there's a lot of other things that, you know, that we do, but that's the most important part. And I could go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I'm taking advantage of being the host and asking all the questions. So I'm going to turn over to the chat, and I'll just go back to the beginning and we'll work through. What is the typical education of your farmers? High school, college, technical school, or is it a mix?
Throughout the years, they have been primarily folks who graduated from high school, and majority college. It's more the trend. But a lot of them have, not a lot, some people have like very agricultural based degrees too, like from like a kind of technical school or an apprenticeship program or a certificate program that they've done in urban or rural areas that like helps feed the knowledge base that they're looking for. So a number of our employees are coming from Farm School NYC, which is a really strong partner of ours. And that's a 2-year certificate program in New York City that we are closely tied with. But we have never employed high school students. We do partner with the NECC to host interns and like a youth program during the summer. So we have like 2 interns that work for us in the summer months, but they're actually paid by the Northeast Community Center, which is a community center in Millerton. And then we also host like 8 to 10 high school students on non-COVID years who work in kind of a large group a couple of days a week at the farm too, just in the summer months.
Great. So next question is, how, if at all, have Rocksteady folks explored education or outreach to the community that is less familiar and welcoming to queer people? I'm asking as a queer spawn, queer daughter of a queer person who was raised in an intentional community farm in Chatham. I found it very hard to go to public schools and encounter a lot of discrimination towards LGBTQ folks. It felt like 2 entirely separate worlds that happened to exist in one close proximity. One was very welcoming, the other was really, really not. How have you been able to bridge that gap that exists in the rural space, especially in the Hudson Valley?
So maybe what I'll do is I'll speak to kind of like our history of working with community groups, and then Amada, do you want to talk about like where we are today? Yeah. Okay. So we've always been very connected to the community we live in. It's something that's really important to us to work with the community center, for example, to go to library events, to go to like fairs in town. And in the beginning, when we started 6 years ago, we did host like a lot of groups, and we hosted like school groups and public school, private school. We had a little bit more of like volunteers on a regular basis who would pop in and out and get to know us, one-offs. So I think, and that was just general kind of like outreach that we were just trying to do as a small business, essentially. I think it was like what a lot of, we're kind of community-oriented people, but I think a lot of small businesses do a lot of outreach to get their name out there. And so we were doing that all over the place. We were trying to get CSA members. We started with 75 members, now we're 500. So there's like a lot of work that it took to build that membership. And that included, like going to places also to give talks, and like when we did that in person, and going to places that like weren't like maybe like that there was a lot of kind of like there just enough connection that they'd let us talk to them, but we're also very different from them. And either way, like kind of some people wanted us to talk because we're farmers, but then we bring in our identity and bridge, and then there's other people in the New York City area who wanted us to come because we were queer, but then we brought in the food and there's a bridge. And so there's a lot of that happening, and real openness to building all those connections and networks. And I think because food is something that everyone values, a lot of people value, I think it's a really beautiful area to really kind of like to work with people who are different than you, and I feel like the community here in a rural area, as that person was saying, I think people have been quite open and welcoming, and I think more and more have felt comfortable bringing in like our identity and like talking about that. I think the more and more we just built our community in general, and just like had a stronger support base, because it can be a very frightening thing for a lot of farmers to be out. And I think, and it is a frightening thing for me too. I've had experiences in my life where my life was threatened and that I didn't feel comfortable being out in a rural space. So like, it's not something that we take lightly. So there was a lot of kind of like, is this safe? Is this not? Okay, we have enough friends who are Republicans who own guns that we feel okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's real. And like feeling like they got us, even though we were suffering. And building enough of that base of like kind of like safety before we started to be even more out and talk about our identity as much. Yeah, I don't know if you want to say more, Amada, about other ways.
Yeah, I just want to say also thank you for to the person who submitted that question. Thank you for also sharing part of your story and those challenges of, the struggle of like being queer out here, which I'm like still new to the area, and I think it would have been really hard for me to imagine transitioning to this area without having like a queer community to welcome me. And so because of that, I think that part of moving forward and like having the energy to also welcome like cis hetero people also into our community as part of our community who want to support us, right? And that are like maybe just like learning about queerness and trans people and LGBTQ issues. We also need to create a space that is like specifically for and by queer and trans people, so that like we can like recharge, refill our cups with joy and energy in order for us to then have more queer and trans farmers out in the community also doing that type of interaction and building work with folks elsewhere. So yeah, we're excited to like be building this pilot program for beginner queer and trans farmers this year, and hopefully that being the building blocks for a full apprenticeship program for queer and trans farmers starting next year. And then in the meantime, you know, in this question of like just welcoming other folks into our space and like getting to know our practices and who we are. The community work days, I think, again, are a great opportunity to build those types of alliances and bridges with folks who might not share our same identities. Because for me, it's important that when folks come to the farm or wherever space that I've worked at, that folks are able to like check in with themselves around like, am I able to follow the leadership of someone who represents like multiple oppressed like identities, right? So me being like a person of color, non-binary, trans person, right? Like, am I willing and able to take leadership from them when they're instructing me on like best practices to like transplant or to like cover the crops with remay so that I'm not hurting myself. And I think that those types of like check-in questions for someone who might not share the same identities as me creates spaciousness for more honest connection and relationship building, rather than saying like, oh yeah, just like check box, like I attended a training on like sensitivity training or whatever it is, anti-bias training, but it's like, no, actually, do you have built relationship with people who are outside of your identities, right? That are, yeah. So those are some of the ways.
Thank you. Did you want to chime in, Lisa, or should I go to the next question? No. Okay. You mentioned greenhouses, but are there other infrastructure or expansion goals that would allow the farm to grow or operate a longer portion of the year? Are there programs that would allow you to buy rather than lease land?
Am I on? Yeah. Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah,
Sorry, I was looking at the chat.
Absolutely. You mentioned greenhouses, but are there other infrastructure or expansion goals that would allow the farm to grow or operate a longer portion of the year? And are there programs that would allow you to buy rather than lease the land?
Yeah, great question. So there are grants through the USDA for hoop houses. So we've applied for 2 more hoop houses to be put up on our land. So that will extend our season, as well as we're thinking about doing a CSA in the winter. There's a lot of demand for us to do a CSA in the winter, but we might do a more collaborative CSA where we buy from a number of other farmers and get to highlight other farmers that are doing more winter growing or also added value stuff that we want to like put out into the world through our network, but not necessarily have a huge operation in the winter. So that's something we're thinking about. But we also like the seasonality of farming in a way. We're not trying to like be California or something. So yes. And yeah, I do like the downtime. I'm coming out of it, But yeah, the leasing land, owning land question is a really important one. We currently lease our land, and we're looking into a land trust, a community land trust, to be sharing that land ownership, and kind of make the model look a little bit different for the land that we're on personally. It's a long-term project. It's going to take a lot of work to figure out the model that works for this land. We don't have the resources to buy, and there aren't a lot of like organizations out there that have the resources to give that type of money. There's Black Farmer Fund, which is like a really great fund that has started to kind of try to resource. There's also NEFOC, Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, that is also like a beginning kind of like organization. So there's like a momentum to try to like get resources to buy land, to partner with other like community land trusts, or partner with other kind of land-based nonprofits. Like there are a lot of conservation organizations out there. And so it's kind of like figuring out a way to partner with these other land-based entities to redistribute that, that access to other people who don't have access. So we're not necessarily looking to buy right now, but there are a lot of people who would like to buy or lease affordably. And there's a lot of programs that are just getting started, but there's a long way to go, to be honest. And I think, yeah, because owning land is like one of the most cost prohibitive things ever. I mean, it's just like, and there's such little access in Dutchess County and a lot of places. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in that area. And I don't know if either Lisa or Amada have anything else to share in that regards with your own research or things. Yeah.
Do you, Maggie, ever have conversations with the Indigenous leaders that you were mentioning? I think you said Schaghticoke Indigenous leaders. Do you talk with them about the land and the future and that sort of thing?
They've been trying to get land for, they were trying to get land for like a decade, and they took care of that land for hundreds of years. I mean, that is like how messed up land access is. They just got access to land and bought. So that, I don't know. There's a like, you know, and that history, and it's hard, you know, like I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of distrust, you know, there's like that people have with Indigenous communities, like, and that run conservation programs and such. Like, it's just a weird world out there. And yeah, but we're in conversation with them as friends, and I walked the land many times with the chief of the Schaghticoke Hawkstorm, and the mountain sides, you know, like around where we are, where he's shown me kind of like the history and where there were like different settlements and rivers, and you know, and the connection that I have to like that beyond the farm is important to me too. You know, it's a full ecosystem, you know, and there's a lot of things that he can see with his eyes that I can't. You know, it's really different to be in land with a leader who has that such an intimate knowledge of the history, just walking through it.
I bet. I will skip to the next question. Many people took up gardening as a pandemic project. Do you see that as a benefit to the pandemic?
Yeah, it is great. People should garden. Gardening makes people happy, and it's like, it's, if people are excited and moved to do that out of necessity this year, like, it's, you know, there are a lot of reasons why people did it. Like, some people were out of necessity, some people were out of curiosity, some people had more time on their hands, you know. So I think it's all good. Like, people need to connect to plants. It helps everyone, I think. Yeah.
Can I add to that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of that, for whatever reason you got into gardening, is also to like value this type of labor more, right? Obviously, it's not at the scale as like, you know, a production farm, right? You get to go at your own rhythm, which is great. But yeah, hopefully like those questions around like where your food is coming from, like who are the farmers who are growing your food, what are the challenges that are affecting their lives, hopefully come into play. And then there's other things like what are the like, resources that we need in order to grow food, right? So for example, last year around this time, there's like a huge like seed scarcity, right? Which a lot of seed companies were like preparing for this year as well. Like a lot of seed companies were only accepting orders from like commercial or like big farms, because there was just like an overwhelming demand from gardeners, which on one hand I think is great. And I think it is also showing us, or like challenging us all, to invest and commit ourselves to preserving seed biodiversity and becoming seed keepers as well, so that we're also replenishing those resources, right, that are important to keep our food system alive and to keep them nourished like within community, right? So I think there are big lessons still to be learned, and a lot of reflections that I think have come out of more people joining land work in whatever capacity that is.
That was a conversation that you and I were having
Thank you.
Last week, Amada, where I was saying that, you know, we're going to talk about all of these issues and, you know, how you're up against this capitalistic system and it's so hard. But I don't think that the average person can actually grasp the physical labor and how hard you all work to feed the community. And I think that that's a great point I hadn't thought about with gardening, is it's just a small taste of the work and the love and the labor that goes into growing food. The next question is, where do you find space to heal amidst the oppressive arms of capitalism's reach?
Lisa, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'll take that softball question. Well, we all three of us love swimming in the pond that is on the farm. As it's getting warmer, we're starting to take advantage of that. Amanda and I took a dip today. Let me look at the phrasing again. Space to heal. Really, I think we have that with each other. Rocksteady, like we really build our relationship with amongst the crew, these people that we spend a large part of our lives with. Like, you know, we understand that it is important how we're treating each other on a day-to-day basis. Like, these moments make up our lives. these conversations, these meals that we share, these interpersonal interactions that we have, we're all working from, you know, having been raised in this system of being oppressors, of being oppressed, and when you're not aware of it, you're recreating all of it. And so there's a constant reminding that you have to do in your body to come back to where you are. And we have the gift of the farm, the land, to like always come back to that place, come back to the earth, come back to one another and realize our intentions, why we're doing this work, why are we together, why are we like reframing our space and trying to build something else. I mean, we're world creating every day. We're world building the space in the future that we want to live in, and it's a practice that happens in each minute of the day. And that's healing. That's really healing. And all of those moments when you find them. And that's, you know, what Amada talked about recharging, like having space where queer people and people of color can heal and recharge. Like I hope everyone heard that and like took that in, because it's so important for us to be able to move in ourselves with the integrity that we also want to hold in the land, and we want to see in others. It takes so much practice. It's a practice. You have to do it every day and try again. But that's a relief. That's a relief from the oppression.
Can I add to that? Thank you, Lisa. That was really beautiful, and I'm so happy that you feel that. And in terms of like a practice, right? Like building a practice in teams. I think part of like what can be healing is also having collective practices that challenge and name like white supremacist culture, right? So things around like individualism, things around like conflict avoidance. And so for me, it is healing to be in a workspace, in a community, in a collective, where feedback is welcome and conflict can be generative, right? And I can, you know, have a conversation with Lisa around some like feedback, but I can also have a conversation with like Maggie, not only like, you know, like it's like rupturing that like employer-employee kind of hierarchy, but also being able to like, hey, I have feedback for you, Maggie, and for Dee, and for whoever future worker owners as well. And that type of communication is disruptive to white supremacy. And it's also, for me, healing because it reaffirms that like my opinions and my voice matter, right? And that there are also people in this team that are like willing and like ready to like listen as well, and like integrate feedback and have like honest conversations, dialogue, generative dialogue. And around the point of, or like the practice of challenging individualism, right? Like we are a cooperative farm. And so that I think as a foundation is already like challenging a lot of like individual profit seeking, which is healing for me, right? To like collectivize or redistribute wealth and benefits for more people. But it also challenges the notion around like, especially when we're in crisis mode, the scarcity that like just like jumps in, and like you have to slash budgets, you have to make cuts. You know, so many austerity measures come into play. That is how governments work. Whole economies will shut down in crisis, right? But instead, if we move out of that very individualistic mindset, we can find spaces for abundance, right? And like, what are the spaces that are like really work, and like, what are the spaces where we can like share that abundance? So for example, like we hired more people this year, right? Like there's more food, like there's more work, there's more members, like CSA members, and it is possible that we can generate abundance and we can share abundance, and that to me is healing.
Maggie, did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, no, you all said such great stuff. I don't need to. Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, I just resonate so much with both what Lisa and Amada said. So sitting with that. And I feel like in particular, the work culture of farming specifically can be very, very toxic. And I think like overworking, like over hours, like farm workers don't have a cap on the hours that you can work. It's like one of the only jobs in the country where you don't have a 40-hour cap in overtime. You know what I mean? And we just got rights to organize. And it's just like, there's so much set up in the culture of agriculture that is just not healthy in general. And it's destructive to of the human involved, as well as the earth, as we were talking about before. But I think there's it's what I've learned kind of in the last 6 years of working at Rocksteady is really trying to push against that norm of just working overtime, working 80-hour weeks, being okay with it, working when you're hurt, working when there's stressed out, feeding on stress almost. There's just so much ingrained in the norms culturally with other farmers, and multi-generations of farmers who are just the norm is unhealthy. And I think it's also this expectation that, oh, you're a farmer, you're not going to get paid well and you're going to work overtime. It's just this is the norm, because there's not anything else for us to look at. Yeah. There's no other examples of what it could be like. So what we're trying to do here is radically different. And it feels sometimes like walking through cement in ways. I feel the resistance of our numbers and our business, my own undoing of my own culture as someone who grew up farming and has worked on farms for many years. The resistance is so intense. So we're one farm trying to do this thing, but there needs to be more examples of other farms out there who are doing a different type of farming and shifting that work culture, shifting that expectation, and valuing paid sick and time off and vacations in the summer, vacations in the winter. These just norms that a lot of farms don't have. Other jobs have those things, but we're just trying to really shift that. And we're just a little bit there, we wish we could pay everyone better. We wish we could have more paid time off, all these things, but it's a long path, right? Because the price of food isn't rising. We're trying to raise the price of our hourly wages, but the price of food isn't going anywhere. It's moved cents, in the last 50 years. It's a very hard predicament.
Do you think that part of the norms are also generational? It just keeps perpetuating it? Because farming to me seems like such a generational work.
Oh yeah. I mean, as you learn from you live your life by role models, and if there's generations of poor habits in a profession that is historically a family profession, mm-hmm. There's a lot of weight to that.
I have taken you way over our time slot. I know you're super busy, all of you, but is there anything else that you want to share about the farm, about you as individuals, that we haven't touched on tonight? I hope everyone will sign up for the, the community working days? Community work day. It looks mm-hmm. so great. Another way to connect to Rocksteady. But is there any last words?
I guess if you can't join our CSA, because we're sold out, which is a good problem to have, and those of you who are learning about our farm, for the first time, I'd say sign up for our newsletter, we try to like do some like education, political education, and the newsletter side of things. So you can find that on our website. Also, we do take tax deductible donations and always connections to grants or family and foundations. So all of that is really, really welcome. I'm usually the point for that type of work. So I'll put my email on the chat. And yeah, just staying involved and community work days, all those things. Those are my last plugs, but
I'm also
Amada
putting
and
your
Lisa, do you have any
website
other
into the
ones?
chat. Well, thank you so much, Maggie, Lisa, Amada. It's been a pleasure. And good night, everyone.